Ladies and gentlemen, I will shut up in a second, but please listen to the sounds which these fish make. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to say two things. First of all, there's scotch tape on my glasses. I'm not trying to look more nerdy. They broke last night and I'm going to have them fixed today. Now, number two, in my other videos, I am showing you footage from the underwater world, mostly from the Philippines, and then I'm explaining, I'm narrating while I'm showing you this footage. Now here, hopefully you listened to the sounds which this damselfish made. And these are lagoon damsels, and this is something I filmed on Danjugan Island in the Negros Occidental province. Now, if I'm raving while I'm showing you this footage, you cannot hear the damselfish, and it would defeat the purpose. So let's talk about who is making these sounds and what sounds they're making and why they are making these sounds. Now, who? So this is a lagoon damsel, the damselfish, the Pomacentridae. These are the family of marine and sometimes freshwater fishes, which also include all these anemone fish, like Nemo, right? Don't call it Nemo. Now, these fish make sounds, and interestingly, it's not completely understood yet what the biomechanics of this sound production are. Probably the jaw, the gill cover, some of the tendons in the jaw apparatus, probably the pharyngeal teeth, so the teeth inside of the mouth of these fish all contribute, and probably the swim bladder somewhat works as a resonance body. Now, let's look at this oscillogram, at the waves, the sound waves, which I recorded here, and I just simply recorded this in stereo with the microphones of my OM Systems TG7 camera, which is very good. And you see 4 minutes of recordings, and then there are these massive sounds, and this is actually me breathing through a scuba regulator, so we will just ignore this. Then we are zooming in here, and again we see every 15-20 seconds or so me breathing. Again, this is not what we want to look at, but we want to look at these small waveforms in between. So these are pops, this is the technical term, and these are very quick pulses of sounds made by this damselfish. And when we zoom in even further, we see that there is this waxing and waning sound signal here. And if we also include a power spectrum, which is basically a decomposition of this signal where we plot, how much power is at each frequency, we see that the majority of the power is at about 250 Hertz. You can see that in the bottom, meaning that about 250 times a second that signal goes up and down, even though it doesn't last a complete second. But this is the speed of the sound waves. And there is some signal in the 2000 Hertz range, which is the higher frequency, so 2000 times a second. And these two powers are overlaid. Now, let's zoom in even more. We can see this waxing and waning signal, and we can see in the power spectrum the power at roughly 250 Hertz and then at roughly 2000 Hertz. Now, this is a fairly typical signal for damselfish. So damselfish sound production has been researched quite well. Typically what distinguishes the different species is the pause, so the period, so how much time passes between these pops. And we cannot really tell here what that period is, because I was recording from a number of individual fish at the same time. But nevertheless, very interesting. I don't think from that particular lagoon damsel the signal had been characterized before. So why are these fish making these signals? Now, if you have watched my channel in the past, you've probably learned that fish are not some primitive vertebrates which had not made the jump onto land, but they're, complex, highly intelligent animals. And they communicate just like birds and mammals communicate. So there are some sounds which are mating calls, where the male would rise up in the water column and then make these pops. And I don't think that's what we are seeing here, though. What we see here is these are territorial threats, and particularly these damselfish. There were many of them, a few dozen such lagoon damsels. And if you go back to the video, you see that they're on this field of staghorn corals. And the top of the staghorn corals are healthy corals, but the bottom is dead and it's overgrown with algae. And I believe this is what they feed on. Now, when I approached them as a scuba diver, they got disturbed. So they made these threat sounds towards me, but then they also started racing around. So they inadvertently crossed boundaries. So there were territorial conflicts, I believe, within the fish. So that one fish would cross into another fish's territory, and then that fish got angry and made these threat signals. So quite interesting. It just gets to show that if you swim around with open eyes and open ears, that in a place like the Philippines, and particularly in a very well-protected place like Danjugan Island, you would see and hear amazing things. And this is definitely the first time I've heard that. There are often dactylos, which are related damselfish, which I see and hear in Darwin underwater making sounds. But this species in such an aggregation making all these pops, this was new to me. I hope you enjoyed that and you enjoyed this explanation. There will be more hopefully educational content coming in the next few months, so stay tuned and thanks for watching.